Hi, my name is Phil Naylor. I'm a psychotherapist, and welcome to this special edition of my channel. So right now it's kind of the holiday season, 2023, and I decided to do this as something a little bit different. And I want to start by saying all real truths stand the test of time. And there's certain writers, films, artwork that kind of reveal certain truths about people, about the world, about human nature. And one of those people, I believe, is Charles Dickens. And he was a genius writer who showed his acute understanding of human nature and the human psyche itself in his unique and extensive stories that were populated with very unique characters. He was writing in the mid 1800s, and he revealed a lot about human psychology before there was even really a subject called, or a study called, psychology. So it's really quite incredible, the insight that he had about kind of how we work and the things that motivate us. And this must have been all kind of subconscious kinds of ideas, but sometimes that's the way that we get ideas, is that they flow to the subconscious. So one time near the Christmas season, I was watching Dickens' A Christmas Carol, which was written in 1843. And I came to the realization that as well as telling this tale of redemption and goodness and all of this, it also outlined a perfectly sound process of psychotherapy before there is even ever such a thing as psychotherapy. And it outlines the process which still holds today of how someone who is struggling with mental health comes to mental wellness. So I'm going to have this video about how this during the season that we can utilize this as a way to help understand how psychotherapy works and just the fundamentals about human nature, because in a way it's about how we all work. So just sit back and let me explain how everything that you need to know about psychotherapy is found in Dickens' A Christmas Carol. So most people are familiar with some version of the Christmas Carol, like whether it's in cartoons or, movies or, spin-offs about how that works as comedies that have been done and retold. But the version that I'm going to use, I think, is the best version and is a classic version. And it's the 1951 black and white version starring Alistair Sim. So that's what I'll be referring to through this, and I'll be showing you little clips of taken from that excerpt as we go. So most people know the basics of the story, but the movie starts off with a kind of an introduction to Scrooge and quickly establishing that he was basically kind of a miserable person. He's really a miserable SOB, right? And it showed that he was cold and uncaring. He was a self-serving miser who despised most people and who was perceived as being exactly that himself. So he lived a life of bitterness and resentment. And there's just a couple of clips here that kind of illustrate that.
Be off with you!
Anyway, Scrooge was in a pretty bad way. Nobody liked him, and he basically made everyone's life miserable around him, and he especially treated his employees really badly. He paid them starvation wages, and basically he was kind of like not a great person inhabiting the world. And if something wasn't done, he was really destined to continue this path of misery and of self and of himself and of other people. And this is the story of how he changed and how he changed through what could be thought of as a psychotherapeutic process, even though it wasn't quite presented that way. But Scrooge came to his therapy via the same path a lot of people come to when family and friends can no longer tolerate and stand by and watch their loved ones continue to descend into that negative spiral, downward spiral of self-destruction. And And they come by way of intervention. And when family and friends finally say, it's enough, you need to get some help. And so this is how the story begins. It shows us of somebody who's in need of some help, in need of an intervention. And in Scrooge's case, though, he had no friends and no close family. So there wasn't much of a selection to come to his intervention. So it was up to a dead guy, his old dead friend, Jacob Marley, to come to him for an intervention. And like most interventions, it was unwanted and a little scary, but necessary.
All right, who were you then?
In life, I was your partner, Jacob Marley.
Oh. Tortured for the rest of my life by a legion of hobgoblins. All of my own creation. It's all humbug, I tell you. Mercy to me.
Man of the worldly mind, do you believe in me or not?
I do. I must. But why do you walk the earth? And why do you come to me?
It is required of every man.
So Marley arranged for the help of 3 ghosts or spirits that would visit Scrooge to assist him in their own unique particular way to restore him back to mental health. But what happens if we relabel these spirits as either 3 different types of psychotherapists or 3 stages of the process of psychotherapy? Marley himself made the first psychological observation of Scrooge, noting that he, and all of us actually, carry a lot of baggage that we need to know and understand and to strive to release in order to be free and well. And this baggage was represented in the movie in the form of chains and money boxes that Marley carried with him. And that represents the boxes and the baggage that we acquire and carry throughout our lives. And it acts as kind of a sort of karma for the next life, and at least in this movie. And so one of the tasks of the psychotherapist is to help free people of the baggage that they carry.
Why are you fettered?
I wear the chain I forged in life. I made it link by link and yard by yard. I girded it on of my own free will and of my own free will. I wore it.
You have my sympathy.
You do not know the weight and length of strong chain you bear yourself. It was full as heavy and as long as this 7 Christmas Eves ago, and you have labored on it since. It is a ponderous chain. Mark me! In life my spirit never roved beyond the limits of our money-changing home. Now I am doomed to wander without rest or peace. Incessant torture of remorse.
But it was only that you were a good man of business, Jacob.
Business! Mankind was my business. Their common welfare was my business. And it is at this time of the rolling year I suffer most. Hear me.
But then the psychotherapeutic process begins in this movie, and it starts with the first therapist, the ghost of Christmas past, who represents, in terms of a therapist, the psychoanalytics therapist. He's the type of therapist that dives into the person's past in order to shed light on how how did you get to be this way in the first place? Like, what happened to you that got you this way? You know, what happened to turn you into that bitter SOB that you are? And so that's how the psychoanalyst starts. He delves into the past. He looks at what happened in our past, in our childhood, in our developmental history that got us to where we are. And from the point of view of the first stage of psychotherapy, it represents anybody going in and starting to gather the person's history in order to understand them and to better gain a context for their lives.
Are you the spirit whose coming was foretold to me?
I am.
Who and what are you?
I am the ghost of Christmas past.
Long past.
No, your past.
What is your business here with me?
Your welfare.
My welfare.
Your reclamation, then.
So this scene shows the beginning of the process of self-inquiry into the things that shape us, usually the bad things. That's what psychotherapists are interested in, the bad things, not so much the good things, though it's important to focus on the good things too. But what's the first thing we learn about Scrooge? It's the first thing that he goes back to with his psychoanalytic therapist. That is that he was shaped by trauma, by childhood trauma, and in particular, the trauma of abandonment. So yes, Scrooge had abandonment issues, and considerable time is devoted to illustrate several abandonment issues in Scrooge's developmental years. So here's a couple of scenes that showed you the crucialness of some of the critical moments of this.
There's my old school. How lonely and deserted it looks.
Not quite deserted. A solitary boy, yourself, Ebenezer, forgotten by his friends, is left there still.
I know.
Father is so much kinder than he used to be that home is like heaven.
For you, perhaps, but not for me. He doesn't know me, nor even what I look like.
In this scene is a crucial point in Scrooge's life. That's when his sister Fan visits him to bring him home, revealing that his father had rejected and abandoned him at boarding school for years, and never being welcome to come home, even for Christmas, until the father had a recent turn of heart. And so this is important because it's important to kind of note the devastating impact of having a family and a father, but being banned from seeing them would be, and being actively told that by your father, that you weren't wanted, and you had no mother who died and left him. And in fact, that was the first abandonment, being left by his mother who died, not an intentional abandonment, of course, but then his father did too. So it was a very difficult experience for a young person growing up. And we also see that Scrooge expressed a core belief, central to the belief that would drive his behavior about himself, the world, and other people, that shaped his actions and behavior in the future.
Never to be lonely again.
Never to be lonely again.
Never as long as I live.
Well, then you must live forever, Fan. Nobody else ever cared for me. Nobody else ever will. You must live forever, Fan.
Oh, dear brother, what nonsense. Everyone loves you very much. You must forgive Papa and forget the past, for our dearest mother's sake.
Oh, Fan.
So then we come to the most painful scene of abandonment. It's when his sister Fanny dies.
She died a married woman and had, I think, children.
One child.
True, your nephew.
She died, giving him life.
As your mother died, giving you life, for which your father never forgave you, as if you were to blame.
You're going to get well again, Fan.
No.
You are. You are. Dear God, you must. Fan, you can't die. Fan, you mustn't die. You're going to get well again, Fan. Fan, you're going to get well again.
And then we see resentment set in as he sees his nephew, who is responsible for his mother's death. So Fanny died giving birth to Scrooge's nephew. And then he begins repeating the family cycle of rejection and abandonment. He, in fact, starts to eventually abandons his nephew and blames him for his loss, just as his father did to him. We see that Scrooge's fear and pain and resentment hardening into another core belief that begins to guide all of his actions right here.
Oh, I think the world's becoming a very hard and cruel place, Mr. Marley. One must steel oneself to survive it, not be crushed under with the weak and the infirm.
In the final scene of abandonment, Scrooge's fiancée dumps him. But there's a little bit more to the story than that. We discover that Scrooge has begun to sow the seeds of his own self-created abandonment by becoming rejecting and unloving himself. And the scene is preceded by several scenes of his career journey, where Scrooge began at the beginning by embracing and valuing relationships. And we saw that eventually they deteriorated, and he deteriorated to become someone who puts money and self-interest first.
She is not changed by the harshness of the world, but you are.
Then you no longer love me.
You no longer love me.
When have I ever said that?
In words, never.
Well, in what then?
In the way you have changed.
But how have I changed towards you?
By changing towards the world.
It's such a terrible thing for a man to struggle to be something better than he is.
Another idol has replaced me in your heart. A golden idol.
It's singular that the world that can be so brutally cruel to the poor professes to condemn the pursuit of wealth in the same breath.
You fear the world too much.
With reason. But I am
the key scene that shows his pivot point of his choosing self-interest and self-protection rather than embracing relationships and others comes in this kind of breakup scene. We see that Scrooge has himself already become an abandoner too, and now his fiancée Alice points that out about how he has abandoned her and left her for a golden idol. And the scene marks the turning point where Scrooge becomes who he is in kind of present day. Now, this whole concept illustrates another important concept of psychology and psychotherapy, and that's locus of control. And this is where, in this film, that Scrooge develops the idea of external locus of control. An external locus of control is the belief that the power to determine happiness and security lies primarily in external circumstances in the world. So, whatever happens in the world determines your happiness. So bad things happen, you're going to be unhappy. If good things happen, you're going to be happy, but you're kind of at the mercy of whatever happens in your journey that happens in the world. You have no power over that. You see him kind of embrace that idea. And this is also key to understanding Scrooge. The idea that we're largely victims of a world that we can't fully control. And what does or does not happen in the outside world is the prime determiner of our happiness, security, and relationships. So he has to take care of himself. He needs to steel himself against the world in order to survive it. And so we see the final breakup here.
In the same breath.
You fear the world too much.
With reason. But I am not changed towards you.
Aren't you? Our promise is an old one. It was made when we were both poor and content to be so. If you had never made that promise, tell me, would you seek me out and try to win me now?
Of course I would.
No. If you were free today, would you choose a darless girl with neither wealth nor social standing? You who now weigh everything by gain? It would bring you nothing but repentance and regret. That is why I released you. You know I'm right, then.
I must bow to your conviction that you are.
May you be happy in the life you have chosen.
Thank you. I shall be.
Goodbye.
Now, having done what he could and not succeeding in the significant change in Scrooge, therapist one, the psychoanalyst, kind of needs to depart and pass him on to therapist two, the ghost of Christmas present. He has an entirely different look and approach. He's a cognitive therapist, and he checks to see if the first therapist approach had been successful. But then he's concerned not so much by the past and how Scrooge came to be who he is, but just to focus on who he is now and to help him challenge and change those negative thoughts and change the perspective and core beliefs that have perpetuated that behavior. And he's also trying to create a consciousness change in Scrooge about how his actions and his attitudes have directly affected his world and the people in it. But we also see Scrooge's resistance to change, even though he knows that he should.
I am the spirit of Christmas present. Look upon me. You've never seen the like of me before, have you?
Never. And I wish the pleasure had been indefinitely postponed.
So? Is your heart still unmoved towards us, then?
I'm too old. I'm beyond hope. Go and redeem some younger, more promising creature. Leave me to keep Christmas in my own way.
Mortal.
If you look at this as a stage in the therapeutic process, this is also where the therapist helps to make the client make connections or join the dots between how his past traumas are affecting his present behavior now and his basic well-being in the world right now. And this is the stage where the client gains to an increased consciousness about themselves and is coached or invited to shift his paradigm that the material circumstances do not necessarily create happiness or security, that people can live in love and find happiness and positivity despite the external conditions that they find themselves in and despite the mistreatment and betrayal by others. And so these clips illustrate Scrooge being shown an alien paradigm to him, that happiness in the face of the meager living standards of Scrooge's employee, Bob Cratchit, and family, and various illustrations in happiness and gratitude despite hardships and mistreatment you can see in these following clips.
Dear flower. It'll be a perfect pudding, my love. A perfect pudding. Won't it, Martha, my dear? Hey, Tim?
It'll be the finest pudding in the whole of London this Christmas, and the goose will be the finest goose. And ours will be the finest Christmas.
I give you Mr. Scrooge, the founder of the feast.
Oh, no!
I wish I had him here now. I'd give him a piece of my mind to feast himself upon.
My dear children, Christmas Day.
Could only be on Christmas Day that I would drink the health of such a hard, stingy, unfeeling man as Mr. Scrooge. You know he is, Robert. Nobody knows it better than you do, poor fellow.
My dear, Christmas Day.
Well, a Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year to the poor old man. He wouldn't let me wish it to him personally, but here it is nevertheless. Uncle Scrooge.
Oh! Well, I don't know that our drinking to him will do him much good.
Nor do I. I hate him.
Oh, I forbid it. I'm sorry for it. I couldn't feel angry with him if I tried.
Do you feel more rested now, my dear?
I do. Bless your dear, gentle heart. Alice. Do you know me, darling? I never thought there was anyone like you left in the whole wide world. Cut me throat, rip me liver if I'm telling a lie. This is the happiest Christmas I ever had.
So the therapist is really trying to affect a change, get them to think differently, to take a new perspective by this method of approach. And that's mostly how we work in a cognitive capacity. We change the thoughts and feelings and challenge, challenge our thoughts that may be unrealistic or not even true at all thoughts. So, but anyway, having had his run at that, finally Spirit 2 kind of checks on his success, making note that he's made somewhat of an impression, but not enough to make a significant impact on his fundamental beliefs and behavior, illustrated here.
Will you profit by what I have shown you of the good in most men's hearts?
I don't know. How can I promise?
So, having not been successful in his endeavor, it's time to call in the big guns. The ghost of Christmas the ghost of Christmas present, having done all he could and perhaps now a little exasperated, turns Scrooge over to his colleague, the ghost of Christmas future, or the transpersonal therapist. This therapist is Scrooge's last resort. It's his last chance. The transpersonal therapist often takes you on a journey, sort of like a vision quest into yourself, where you may encounter the reality of who you are at the very center of your being. And the transformational therapist tends to use more unusual or offbeat methods to help their clients. Anything from a wide range of modalities such as art or sound therapies, bodywork therapies, hypnosis, NLP, holotrophic breath work, IFS, internal family systems approach, narrative therapy, and even psychedelics, and the use of ritual and shamanic journeying, to name just a few approaches. This is the therapist who kind of represents the mysterious shamanic figure who can take us through otherworldly realms of the imagination and projections of the future to confront the client directly with themselves, where they can be moved to change. But before taking such a journey, Scrooge first confirms that the other two therapists have not been successful. He's tried everything, and he's still stuck in resistance to change. So something drastic is needed.
I am in the presence of the spirit of Christmas yet to come. And you're going to show me shadows of things that have not yet happened, but will happen. Spirit of the future, I fear you more than any other spectre I've seen. But even in my fear, I must tell you, I am too old. I cannot change. It is not that I am impenitent. It is just that wouldn't it be better if I just went home to bed? No. Lead me then.
It's interesting that indigenous shamans often dealt with the malady of loss of soul. And to address this issue, the shaman would guide the sufferer on an inner journey to reconnect with his or her soul. Transpersonal, transformational therapy is sometimes thought of as soul work. And this is the type of approach that Scrooge apparently needed. So in earlier times, transpersonal therapist was the shaman of the tribe who led people through their journeys into the other world where they obtained healing. And the shaman was also the keeper of the stories of the tribe and conveyed teachings through the vehicle of storytelling. Similarly, the transpersonal therapist is often a narrative therapist, who helps the individual recognize the story that they've been telling to themselves and to reinterpret the story in a new and empowering way. But the narrative therapist is perhaps more importantly concerned about how the final chapters of the story is completed. The job of the narrative therapist is to help the client become the conscious author of the rest of their story, from the present forward into the future. So the Ghost of Christmas Future is a shamanic figure, the transpersonal narrative therapist. And it's a little bit terrifying. And the Ghost of Christmas Future is kind of a terrifying figure. So at this stage of the tools and techniques are kind of largely abdicated in favor of simply guiding the person through an experience of helping to articulate the meaning of the experience themselves, helping the person to articulate and really grasp the meaning of their experiences by themselves. So it is with the Ghost of Christmas Past guiding Scrooge through scenes of impossible future So it is that we see the Ghost of Christmas Past guiding Scrooge through scenes of a possible future world that may emerge. This isn't a real world that exists or existed like the past or the present did. It's a possible world, an other world, where things are but shadows of what may be. One possible ending to the story.
Oh, we hope not. Very well, then. Who's the worse for the loss of a few things like these? Not a dead man, I suppose.
No, indeed.
If he wanted to keep him after he was dead, why wasn't he amiable in his lifetime? If he had been, he'd have had somebody with him when he was struck with death, instead of lying gasping out his last there alone by himself.
There never was a truer word spoke. It was a judgment on him.
I wish it was a little heavier one, and it would have been if I could have laid my hands on anything else.
Now open my bundle, Joe.
Come on, what's in it?
Ah,
Hey?
you wait and see.
Yeah.
Bed curtains.
Bed curtains?
Ah, bed curtains.
What do you... Don't you say you took these down, rings and all, and... Oh, him lying there?
Yes, I do. Why not?
You was born to make a fortune, ma'am, and you certainly will.
I certainly won't hold back my hand when I can get something in it. For the sake of such a man as he was, I promise you, Joe.
These his blankets, too.
Whose else do you think? He ain't likely to take cold without 'em, I dare say.
He didn't die of anything catching,
Oh,
did he?
don't you be afraid of that. I wasn't too fond of his company. I'd loiter about him for such things if he did. And you can look through that till your eyes ache and you won't find a hole in it. It's the best one he had, and a fine one, too. They'd have wasted it if it hadn't been for me.
What do you mean, wasted it?
Well, they'd have buried him in it, of course. But I took it off of him again, as if calico ain't good enough for burying. Anyway, it's just as becoming to the body. He couldn't have looked uglier than what he did in this one.
It's poetic justice. He frightened everybody away from him when he was alive, and now he benefits us when he's dead.
Before I draw nearer to that stone, answer me one question. Are these the shadows of things that must be? Or are they only shadows of things that might be? I know that men's deeds foreshadow certain ends, but if the deeds be departed from, surely the ends will change. Tell me to so with what you show me now.
He's shown scenes of people not caring at all about his departure from the earth and even taking a ghoulish pleasure in it. He sees business acquaintances discussing his death. No one's interested in attending his funeral unless a lunch is provided, and no one knows where his money's gone. Maybe he just left it to his company. His money's insignificant now. It's disappeared without benefit to anyone. Meanwhile, he is shown how the Cratchits grieve the loss of Tiny Tim, who Scrooge's money could have saved. And Tim is missed, but not Scrooge. People are left to pick like vultures over his meager belongings for the few shillings they could get for them. And he hears the words, "He frightened everyone from him while he was alive, why not profit from him when he's dead? And these words were significant. You know, he frightened everybody away from him while he was alive. And Scrooge realized that he is the one responsible for his utter loneliness and misery. He is creating it. He is abandoned because he caused people to abandon him, and he abandoned other people. And the result is the most utter abandonment that he can imagine. And this is symbolized by his stark tombstone in a cold, abandoned graveyard, forgotten, not cared about, and neglected. And this is a very strange but common phenomena in human psychology and in psychopathology, that we create the very thing that we don't want. You know, what did he not want? At the beginning, we saw that he was in his pain, and what he feared was being abandoned and not cared about. And that's what he got in the end. And he created the very thing he feared the most of all. And now the pain of not changing has become very acute.
No, Spirit, no. Tell me I'm not already dead. Tell me I'm not already dead. Tell me I'm not already dead. Hear the Spirit. I'm not the man I was. Believe me, I'm not the man I was. Why show me all this if I'm beyond all hope? Oh, pity me, Spirit, pity me, and help me. Help me to sponge away the writing on the stone if I repent. And I do repent. I'll make good the wrongs I've done my fellow men. I'll change. I'm not the man I was. I'm not the man I was. Believe me, I'm not the man I was. I'm not the man I was. I'm not the man I was.
And so this is really revelatory in that Scrooge now realizes that he's not the victim of the world and of other people. After all, he's the creator of his world. He impacts the world and other people just as much, if not more, than the world and other people impact him. And he's been negatively impacting the world and those around him, but realizes that he also has the power to be a force for good. If he has the power to drive people away from him, he also has the power to drive them to him. He doesn't have to be alone. He could be the change he wanted to be in this world and to see in this world. And so this is a big transformation from Scrooge to go from an external locus of control, where he sees all of the power to affect change and happiness and cause misery out there in the world, to an internal locus of control, where we see ourselves as the most relevant agent of power and change in the world, that we have the power to impact the world. And we put into to put that into more familiar language, Scrooge moved from a disempowered state to a completely empowered state of mind. And so now Scrooge's fear was that it was too late, that the world he was visiting was real and he was already dead with no power to influence the world anymore, and that he'd missed his chance. And he declared that he had changed finally. Finally, this was enough to push that change over. In an instant, I'm not the man I was. And he begs for the Spirit for another chance. And of course, he's given it. When he wakes up, he's indeed changed. Scrooge has woken up, metaphorically speaking, that morning, and he's elated. He hasn't merely tweaked his behavior, he's completely transformed himself. He shed his old self, and as the butterfly sheds the cocoon, and this is true healing. He stepped entirely outside of himself into a completely new paradigm, as we can see here.
Are you quite yourself, sir?
What? I don't know. No, I don't think so. I hope not.
What?
The curtains are still here. They're still here. You didn't tear them down and sell them. They're here now. Everything's here. I'm here. And the shadows of things that would be can still be dispelled. And they will be. I know they will be. I know. I don't know what to do. I'm as light as a feather. I'm as happy as an angel. I'm as merry as a schoolboy. And I don't know what day of the month it is. I don't know how long I've been amongst the spirits. I don't know anything. I never did know anything. But now I know that I don't know anything. I don't know anything. I never did know anything. But now I know that I don't know. All on the Christmas morning. I must stand on my head. I must stand on my head. Please, Mr. Dilber. I am not mad. Even if I look...
So all of this is the real job of the therapist, to help the client see the world and, most importantly, themselves through an entirely new set of lenses, to take off the old set of glasses that they previously saw the world through and to replace them with another more powerful and accurate set. And Scrooge is giddy with joy when he realizes that he's had a second chance and that he has the power to change the world, and sets about doing so. All of his grievances and resentments have completely dissolved. Now we see a key aspect of the healing process. Scrooge has forgiven everyone he was holding a grudge against, and now he seeks forgiveness from those around him, and he rejoins the community, as we see here.
Young man, I think.
Oh. Uncle Ebenezer.
Fred, is it too late to accept your invitation to dinner?
Too late? I'm delighted, delighted. My dear, look who it is.
Can you forgive a pig-headed old fool for having no eyes to see with, no ears to hear with, all these years?
Yes, you dear uncle. You've made Fred so happy. Oh, blessed him.
This way, Mr. Cratchit, please.
It's only once a year, sir. It won't be repeated. I was making rather merry yesterday, sir.
I'm sure you were. Well, we won't beat about the bush, my friend. I'm not going to stand this sort of thing any longer, which leaves me no alternative but to raise your salary. I haven't taken leave of my senses, Bob. I've come to them. From now on, I want to try to help you to raise that family of yours, if you'll let me. Well, we'll talk it over later, Bob, over a bowl of hot punch.
Scrooge was better than his word. He became as good a friend, as good a master, and as good a man as the good old city ever knew, or any other good old city, town, or borough in the good old world. And to Tiny Tim, who lived and got well again, he became a second father.
Uncle Scrooge!
And it was always said that he knew how to keep Christmas well, if any man alive possessed the knowledge. May that be truly said of us and all of us. And so, as Tiny Tim observed, God bless us, everyone.
So Scrooge delights in surprising people as a complete turnaround of character, and we find that Scrooge is better than his word. And he ended up becoming a loving figure in the town and a second father to Tiny Tim, who got well, and now is included and loved part of the community, surrounded by family and friends. And he found what he wanted and needed in the world by giving it out himself. And so here is that we've learned a kind of fundamental lesson about for people and human nature. That may be something that we all have to discover, that we have to find that within ourselves and give it out. And that's our redemption. And that's what saves us from the fears of abandonment and rejection that we all carry to some degree. So we've kind of really unfolded the therapeutic process from beginning to end, to start with a review of the past and working through on changing our patterns and beliefs in the present, and then doing the deeper work to effect complete transformation if we need it. Or it's a tour through the various psychotherapeutic approaches, psychodynamic, cognitive, and transpersonal, showing how resistance and stuckness and old paradigms are encountered and how they have to be challenged. In the end, Scrooge is healed from his trauma, realigned with his empowering new story. And he does that through re-engaging with parts of himself that he'd lost. His compassion, his love for life, and his forgiveness of self and others. He had to get reconnected with those things that he'd forgotten, that he did at one time have in his past. And sometimes for many people, just 1 or 2 steps in that process is good and sufficient to create the necessary changes that we need for as an individual. But sometimes we need to take all 3 steps to initiate that change. But when that transformational change happens, it's truly powerful. And I thought that this was a powerful illustration of how all of that works, what therapists do in their work or try to do, and the journey that a person experiences going through that therapeutic process. And sometimes change is slow, and sometimes it happens really quickly. And often they say all change first happens slowly, then suddenly. And we saw that happen with Scrooge in that process. That change happens slowly, then suddenly. But when true change happens, it is truly transformational. And that's what we all hope to see in working with the people that we work with, and that we all hope to experience as well in our stage of growth. So anyway, I hope you enjoyed this illustration, and maybe it'll help you watch that movie thinking about it in just a little bit of a different way next time. So thank you for joining me.